to unleash your inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another exciting and insightful hour of conversation. And I know you are going to absolutely love my special guest today. As we get started, let's take a moment and think about why do we talk about Goldilocks and why, as a Goldilocks community, we're focused on getting it just right. What is Goldilocks reminding you? To me, Goldilocks is that inner child in each of us. There was this time in each of our lives we knew exactly what we wanted, and we knew exactly how to go about accomplishing it and convincing the adults around us to do it for us. If you don't remember your own self that way, imagine your children, your nieces, your nephews, your neighbors' children. Puppies and little kittens have this ability too. They know exactly how to tug at the heartstrings and influence the adults and make the adults do everything they want with a smile on the face. Somewhere along the way, we've lost that art. We've lost that art and completely surrendered to the fact that I have to be right. It's my way or the highway. And for me to succeed, everybody else has to lose, because we have been sold this bill of goods of it's win or lose, black or white, right or wrong, right? But life doesn't belong in that binary world. As a technology background person, I always jokingly say the binary Boolean algebra is for the computers, not for the humans, right? We live in a space of gray. We need to appreciate all the gradations. And so how do we get back to that childlike wonderment and the ability to influence? And the Goldilocks story is reminding us of that. She knew that her porridge or her soup shouldn't be too hot or too cold. Right? My guest and I were talking about how do you find that perfect place that is neither hot nor too cold, right? Chicago is too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. Where is that perfect place? A place we sit, a place we lay down. We don't want it to be too soft and we don't want it to be too hard. How do we show up in that balance, in that centeredness? And why is that important, you may ask? Research shows that we can each influence only three levels from where we are. So if I come from an extreme right end of a particular issue, I can only influence people who are three levels towards the center from my extreme position. If I come from the extreme left end of that same issue, similarly, I can only influence three levels towards the center of that particular issue. But what if I stepped out of my own myopic thought process and took perspective and looked at how a particular issue affects various people differently? And from that place of perspective taking, when I start communicating and I start engaging, I will find myself getting centered. And all of a sudden, I am able to, I don't have to be snap dab in the center. I can be slightly left or right of center. And I can influence three levels towards my right, three levels towards my left, and everybody else along the center. I have taken my 3 degrees of influence, and because of my ability to take perspective and my propensity to get centered, I now have 7 degrees of influence. So even in my most selfish moments, I need to be able to come from that middle so that I can truly influence the outcome that is going to be beneficial for me. Successful global corporations lead from the middle for that reason and that reason alone. Because if it's top down, you can only influence 3 levels down. If it's bottom up, you can only influence 3 levels from the bottom up. And therefore, both extremes are totally disconnected. Goldilocks is reminding us, get centered, get that integrated perspective. And in that process, we're able to get it just right. And what it also does is moves the needle for us to get to a place of shared prosperity. Because if I am to win and other people lose, there's no reason for them to engage. How do I create that win-win collaborative, co-creative environment so that there's a reason for others to engage, and in the process, we all win? Think about your purpose. Even your purpose sits in the centeredness of three elements: what you love, what you're great at, and what the world needs. If you love something and you're not great at it and the world doesn't need it, too bad. You can love it, but you can't do anything with it, right? You can just amuse yourself. If you're great at it, but you don't love it, you'll resent yourself doing it, and the world doesn't need it, so nobody really cares that you resent it either. So how do you find your purpose in that centeredness? And then how do you show up from that centeredness to build shared prosperity, to influence, to thrive? That is the essence of Goldilocks. That is the essence of what we are trying to accomplish as a Goldilocks community when we talk about unleashing it and getting things just right. As we go into today's conversation, I want us to take 3 nuggets of wisdom into it with us. And these are thoughts and ideas you probably already have from your life perspective, but let's purposefully take this, intentionally take this into the conversation. One is to always remember our challenges polish us to our brilliance. You know, diamond and charcoal is chemically the same compound, right? The only difference is charcoal sat in a bag in a grocery store and diamond was put under immense, unimaginable pressure to become brilliant. Remember, your challenges are polishing you. Therefore, graciously dance through the challenges of life, because that is what's going to make you who you are. They don't diminish you. They truly lift you up and make you shine. The second nugget of wisdom I want you to take into the conversation is you do get better with doing. So like Nike says, just do it. Stop hopping. Complaining and whining doesn't accomplish anything. Just go accomplish the task at hand. Is there perfection? There's really no such thing as perfection. Perfection is a goal we can tend towards. And the more we do, the better we get. Imagine if Thomas Edison said the first time he made a light bulb and it didn't work, that he was a failure and sat in a corner. We wouldn't have light today. He found 10,000 plus ways how not to make a light bulb. How many different ways have you found how not to do something? Right? So doing it and learning from it is not failure. Failure is never trying or giving up. Keep that in mind as we go into the conversation. And the third nugget of wisdom is, remember, you got this. Take that leap. Take that leap towards your purpose with the faith in your capability to stick the landing. Whatever you need is already inside of you. The energy you bring, the energy you put out is the energy you draw from. So bring the right energy and take that leap. And you'd be surprised how the energy in the universe will rise up to meet you and you will stick the landing. Just like when you learned to ride a bicycle, did you give up after you tried the first time and fell? No. Between tears and everything else, you were determined because you were going to ride that bicycle and go see places, right? We all did that in our childhood. What has changed? Technically, nothing should have. So find that inner child inside you and resurrect that child inside of you, and then take that child along for the journey, because it's that child that is going to help you. Your inner child, your inner wonderment, your inner tenacity that comes with being that child is going to help you succeed. To help us have this conversation today, a failure is not an option. Keep going. It is never too late to begin again. Is Dr. Cheryl Lenz, a co-author of our upcoming anthology. Cheryl, welcome to the episode.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with what you're trying to do to get people to shift their thinking. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you. My pleasure and honor. And so excited for you to be a part of this book journey. And let me tell you folks a little bit about Dr. Cheryl. Dr. Cheryl Lenz, known as the academic entrepreneur, is a unique and dynamic speaker who intensely connects with her audience, having one foot in academia and one foot in the business and entrepreneurial space. Her goal is to offer the audience pearls of wisdom today they can use tomorrow in their personal and professional lives. It is not enough to know. The expectation is for participants to take actions and do. Join Cheryl on her journey to connect these dots, to provide inspiration, knowledge, and counsel to move forward effectively. Known globally for her writing on leadership and failure, as well as critical and reflective thinking, she has been published more than 52 times with 26 writing awards. An accomplished university professor, speaker, and consultant, she is an international best-selling author and top quoted publishing professional on ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. She took the stage as a TEDx speaker in October 10, 2020. Please welcome Dr. Cheryl to this episode.
Thank you so very much.
So Cheryl, we don't come into a career thinking about how not to fail, right? So what brought you to the point of talking about this and helping individuals deal with it? Talk about it to us in terms of the duality you maintain, right? The entrepreneur and the professor.
It wasn't something I anticipated. I didn't see it coming. Sophomore year at the University of Illinois, I was challenged with my dream since I'd been 5 years old was to become a professional church organist, pipe organist. And I was the only undergraduate in a graduate program. And my professor came into my practice room one day and says, "You're done, find another line of work." And he walked out and the door clicked behind him. And I sat there wondering, excuse me, but what just happened here? I was expecting to prepare for my juries. And as a music performance major, that would be a performance exam, as we might take a written exam. I wasn't even given the opportunity to try. I was dismissed. And I sat there in the practice room where I had spent, sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day trying to figure out where my dream, the music just died. I mean, it was such a painful journey for me, the fact that I suddenly just had to divert, much like COVID has done for us. It was forced compliance. He was the gatekeeper. He had been playing 40 years. And that's what I heard, is that I was not good enough. So I just decided, if you don't want me, I don't want you. So I went to my counselor and I found another line of work. I had the most amazing time in a very different path my junior and senior year. But here's where it gets difficult. I walked away from who I was for 35 years. I didn't play. I didn't look at the music. I gave all of my stuff away. And here's what most of us do, which is what prompted the idea of failure. We fail once. That was my light bulb story with Edison, right? I turned it off, I shut it down, and I avoided it for 35 years. But here's where the universe comes into play. We never completely avoid this. I was getting all kinds of messages because music was my sanctuary. There is no way I can move away from that completely, but it was just too painful because somebody stood between me and my dream, and I never contemplated another way forward. It was either I was going this way or it was nothing. So I just completely shut it off. And I had an amazing journey and I've had an amazing career. It just doesn't look like I initially thought. But COVID did something really interesting for me. November of 2019, a baby grand piano found me. And it was very interesting that suddenly music came back into my life in a way that I never thought possible. And I was interviewed, not given the opportunity to buy, but interviewed to have the privilege of being able to house this family heirloom of 30 years. And so it was very interesting, the number of years that came in. And I remember bringing it into my home and sitting with my hands on the keyboard crying, absolutely crying. The pain was immense, being able to look at, well, what do I do now? Because this is not something I've touched for more than 35 years. That piano has gotten me through COVID. Now, fast forward one more time, and this is something that my TEDx talk did not give me an opportunity to resolve, because I teach about failure and the idea of giving up and walking away from a dream that I should have never walked away from. I approached the gentleman who is the music director at our church and asked him if I might try and see if I had anything magic left in these fingers. And it was just delayed and delayed. I had asked him around November because a friend of mine kept bugging, and she was much like your introduction, quit harping about it, do something about it. We're tired of hearing you complain about it. It was strange that it just finally came back. And so here's where the magic starts, is on Valentine's Day of this year. I was given my shot. And the director of the church allowed me to come back into the church and to play for the first time in 35 years. It was magical. And the fact is, there's still a little magic left in these digits. And I find it interesting that I fell back in love with me and my music in the greatest sanctuary on life for church. And it was painful and beautiful at the same time. But very few people get that second chance, third chance. I can't even tell you how many lives I might have had, is to be able to look at that idea as failure is failure when you let it stop you completely. I delayed it, but didn't realize the universe kept trying to contact me, and I had shut off the frequency, much like a radio. I just turned it off. But as I started opening and gone from, I'm a college professor, so I spent all my time up in intellectual land, and friends of mine said, Cheryl, turn it off and go from your head to your heart. And when I did that, the magic happened. And it was the hardest part because it was painful, most pain I have ever experienced when I lost everything in 2016, my home, my family, my dog, everything. And I had to figure out a way to get it back. And the universe is like, we've been waiting for you for a while, girl. We've been expecting you, and you're right on time. And so now I've had the greatest gift of all, is to be able to fix something that I put away for more than 35 years. Now, am I great? No, but I remember the music director, who's no longer at that church, by the way. I find it very intriguing that this is something that happened and he's since moved on. But there was a time window that helped me correct an error from my past and to reconnect with a dream I've had my whole life. And now I continue to play and the music is back, and I will never allow that dream to go away again.
I am so happy. I'm so happy to hear it. And this is a good story for everybody to remember, right? And everybody can go back to one of their own scenarios that put them off course because somebody said something.
And it was so strange that that one person that I allowed him to influence in there. But I wonder two things. First of all, things happened for us, not to us. There was obviously something else the world needed me to do in a different career field that now is allowing me the opportunity, because I have a lot of different gifts that I would have never explored had he not said that. And he passed away a few years after that. And I actually wanted to go back and thank him, because I know that's going to be the strangest thing that your audience will ever hear, is the fact that I wanted to thank him for that gift of failure, because a gift it was. I didn't recognize it, and I was very stubborn and less than, what did you call it, elegance, gracious, kind. I was really mad. And now I want to dance through all of the other failures that have happened to me with that grace, that elegance, that ability to recognize it wasn't bad. It was just something I didn't understand yet. And if I would have had a mentor, would have had somebody, I could have stayed in the gift of music, maybe not been the child prodigy, because he was training for Olympians who were going to play at Notre Dame Cathedral or Holy Name or any of these other major institutions. I wasn't good enough, but I was good. And that's the difference. Just because I couldn't be the best as an Olympian doesn't mean I didn't have the skills to play at a church or to play funerals or just to keep my sanctuary or my hobby, whatever it may be. And it was strange what we hear. Mm-hmm.
And it's also, you may just want to play for you, not for anybody else, because some of these things we need to do for our own self, for our own joy, to get that benefit for ourselves, because that is where our soul feels happy. And to give the power over to somebody else to say, Einstein's quote comes to my mind. If we tell a fish that he's dumb because he can't climb a tree, the fish is going to live its own whole life wondering what can it do better, differently to climb a tree. A fish was never meant to climb a tree. A fish was supposed to swim. Monkey was supposed to climb a tree. You can't compare a monkey and a fish, right? So how do we make sure adults are mindful in the way they talk to young people and youth so that they don't destroy? One of the lessons I learned very young in life is, when you give feedback to people, do it in a way that is constructive. Don't destroy the spirit. Because
exactly. I tell my students to separate the skill from the person. The person is always amazing, as I had always been, but it's like Dorothy in her red shoes. My confidence took a hit for decades because I thought there was something wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't as good as my playing in comparison to others, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't good and that I wasn't absolutely amazing for it. Again, person's skill. And I've seen a lot of people take other people out because the words can hurt. And that gatekeeper did a number on me, and I was too young to understand the capacity of it, the enormity of what was happening to just shut a piece of your soul off. But it was amazing that even took a little while to come back. The universe was always there when I was open enough to the possibilities to say, hello, we're still here. Let's fight for that dream again, even if it's just for you. I'm not going to set the world on fire, but I'll tell you, my completeness, my wholeness, that contentment, that piano got me through COVID.
And that's the important thing. It works for you. It's a part of who you are, and it gives you joy. So why shouldn't one do what makes them happy?
I wish I would have gotten that lesson easier, because being a musician is not what I do, it's who I am. And you're very astute to be able to know that that was a part of me that I actually became very ill throughout my life. And it was a hard thing to understand because I wasn't living my purpose. And I was doing all these other amazing things, and the award came and all of the other stuff that I've done in my life, and not to discount it because I've had a wonderful journey, but there was always felt like there was something missing. There was a piece of my soul that just wasn't quite there, right? And you couldn't put my finger on it for decades. And then I realized the whole idea of the red shoes, going, oh my gosh, Dorothy, you have always had this power. And you had no idea it'd been sitting in front of you the whole time. But to my credit, it wasn't that I wasn't pursuing it. I turned it off. I mean, because it was too painful. And many people will do that. I know friends, it's easier to avoid. It's easier not to deal with it. It's easier to pretend the white elephant in the whole zoo isn't walking in front of you, because it's a personal part that I remember, that hole in my stomach for a long time. And I was actually in a wheelchair for 9 months. The universe finally brought me to my knees, and they're like, you know what? We're going to get your attention. And nobody could figure out why. And then there was a message that was received. I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. Really? That's it? It's all about music? And the answer is, when music came back, my body healed. And now I can do amazing things I couldn't do years ago. And I will never go back in that chair, because I had the power the whole time, but I had just given up. And when you give up on your dreams can sometimes give up on you. And so it may have been 35 years, but I'm here to say that I'm one of the lucky ones that realized it before it was permanent. And that now I have the gift of music back. And I'll tell you, people have noticed a difference. Like, Cheryl, what did you do? You colored your hair, you did this. I'm like, I can tell you, it just gave me a whole new life on life to know that that's part of my soul gets to breathe now, and I get to put it back. And it's something I'm sorry I walked away from, but it's never too late. Like your quote, it's never too late. And you've got to have the ability that you got to trust the universe, that where you are is where you're meant to be. And sometimes you got to fight for yourself. And I wasn't willing to fight, because who's going to stand up to a college professor when you're 20 years old, right? I
So if
didn't.
you were to take this lesson learned, because when things don't work out the way we expect, it's technically not failure, they're setbacks. I find
Correct.
the language very funny because it's always in dichotomies.
Well, and
Right?
I don't even think it's a failure in the sense we entitled it a failure because of something we haven't done. But there's this 3-letter word that's really powerful called yet. And we haven't had the ability to do something. It's like, so we can change course, we can change our mind, we can adjust things. But I always thought failure was permanent. He said no, end of story. There was no one to appeal to. I could have done amazing things. I could have stayed in music. I could have been an administrator or a producer, any one of a million things. I turned it off because I didn't know you could do something else. I
So
had to give myself permission.
What prompted that? The reason I ask is there are other people who turn it off too. So
Yeah.
is it fear? It is a fear of rejection, a fear of not being good enough. What was the combination of things that told you to turn it off? Because if we understood that and we named it, then we can help people deal with it differently.
Part of it, I think the easiest way to answer that question was judgment. Somebody who was in a position of talent evaluated my skill and found that I was wanting. And that was the hardest thing. Had he been able to say something, it's like, Cheryl, you're not as good as this group, because there's only 5 other graduate students. And these folks have gone on to do amazing things around the world. My talents were not in that area, but I didn't understand the difference Olympian versus just playing the sport. I was still very good at it, and it could have been adequate somewhere else, but I was no Mozart. And that was the part that I allowed someone to be able to believe what they said. And it was a judgment, but I wasn't good enough. But that's what I heard. What I should have heard was I wasn't as good as. There's a big difference between that. And it affected me personally because I couldn't separate the skill between me. I thought I was the problem and I wasn't good enough. For decades, I thought that. We have to take a really good evaluation of somebody's person's opinion. Now, for someone who's as skilled as he was, 40 years of an absolute master organist, the man was brilliant. That was the one person's opinion to have, but I couldn't put it in perspective. So it wasn't a bad thing. It was just a, Cheryl, maybe we might want to rethink something, because I would have lived my life potentially as a starving artist and may have missed an entire world that had to be open to me because I needed other options. I would not have explored those other options had Dr. Hamilton not said no. But I wish it would have included keeping it as a hobby or keeping it open. But to your point, I turned it off because it was painful. I sat there and had my tears, and my parents were actually not supportive because they were grateful that Dr. Hamilton turned me off because they couldn't convince me at all. And they're like, all right, we'll let you go to school. We're tired of fighting. You're going to go. And they were really actually relieved that he did not support my ability to go forward and that I moved in a different direction. So when you don't have that support.
Did they feel that you were not Olympian category, but you were not hearing them?
No, I don't think there were no musicians in my family, so they couldn't evaluate my skill. But what they evaluated was their perception and expectations of the starving artist mentality. They wanted me to be self-sufficient. They wanted me, particularly as valedictorian, I had a lot of options in front of me. They didn't think music was a viable option to go. It's like, really, with all this talent, and you're going to do this, really? And that was not something in there. So I think they didn't know how to handle it either. And so I had a lot of people in my world who couldn't help me process that ability. And the second part is I had never failed anything until I was a senior in college. I never got my first C or my first F. So when I went to college and I failed, I mean, go big or go home. I never do anything small. That it was not something I knew how to fail. And that's something I want to impress on your audience here is you need to learn how to fail. It is not something that is a skill that we teach. I have been teaching it for the last 25 years. And most of my bosses, I scare the heck out of them. And they're like, so let me understand this. You want to teach them how to do this? I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. I want you to fail as fast as you can, as often as you can. Let's get it all out of your system, find the wrong way to do it. And then we'll get back on the right track. Fail faster, succeed sooner. And that's something that a lot of my bosses are like, okay, we'll try it your way. And they would realize that it was a process to teaching failure, but we don't teach that 4-letter word. Oh my gosh, people can't even say it, let alone do it. And once we get available to it and go, oh yeah, I take failure out to lunch. I understand what it's teaching me. It's a gift. It's not a bad thing, but we make that a bad thing. I call it a judgment word, just like money. Money is inherently good or bad, but we make it good or bad by our judgment. So was this what happened to me for failure? And so I teach failure quite a bit. And it's really funny because it's always the F word that changes your life. And as soon as we know, it's like, well, it's not a bad thing. It's like, no, it's a redirection. It's a pivot. It's an opportunity to do it again. And in my case, to fix something from 35 years ago. But it's only permanent if you turn it off permanently. And I'm so glad that through a series of very interesting events that were very purposeful, even though they were painful, they helped me resurface something that now I can't even describe to you how much joy it brings me to have all of music, because I had to turn all of it off, and not even just the playing because it was just too painful. But most people do that. You know, you fail the bar exam, you didn't get into med school, they don't try again, they stop. And that's what I did. First time, Edison would not be happy with me. He's like, really? I had 10,000 times and you quit in the first try. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, I always bring up Edison. We were taught these kind of information as storytelling to remind us. And so I have been both in the Eastern and the Western world. One part of the world talks and develops children from a continuous improvement perspective. The more you do, the better you're going to get at it. So just keep doing it, and you're only going to tend towards perfection. And the other world says you're right or wrong, you succeed or you fail, you're a winner or you're a loser. And so it truly messes up your mind. I was lucky I came from that part of the world to the Western world. And so when I have led organizations and when I have led people, and my background is finance and continuous improvement, it sits in the sweet spot of reminding people we just get better doing it over and over and over again.
Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours for mastery. You don't pay a doctor for that 15 minutes you're in the office. You don't pay a plumber for that 15 minutes in their home. You pay them for all the failure they did up to that point in time, so they know how to do it the first time the right way, and then you charge you $200 for that 15 minutes in their
I'm
home. You
glad you
can't
brought
do
up
that.
doctors, because doctors and lawyers don't perform, they practice.
Ah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the rest of us don't get to practice, we have to do. I always am fascinated by the language that defines the medical practice and the legal practice. They are in practice, meaning they're always trying things out. The rest of us don't get that luxury. But
Well, I don't know about that. The one thing, there's another part that was really important to my life is that I became a military wife and I got married and moved 38 times. That forced reinvention. Every time we had to move, every 2 years, I had to interview, half a dozen times or more, or I had to quit a job I hated or quit a job I loved. Either way, I had to reinvent. And so after about the third time, it was it was like, what do I get to do now? I've had more careers than most people, and I'm only 55. I can't wait to see what the next ones are. We don't think like that. We think I'm going to be a doctor from the point that I'm 5 years old and that's all you get. Or I'm going to be, and it's difficult. And I will tell you, when I had my second master's that I just finished in March, it was really humbling at this level of expertise to go back to the beginning of a new field where I knew nothing. My ego took a hit that I had to remember of, you know what, you're not an expert here. And you're going to have to start from the beginning in a brand new field. And that keeps your ego in check, because it's more comfortable when we become the expert. We're doing something for 35 years. In my case, 22 as a college prof. I should hope by God I know what I'm doing by now, or you should get your money back. But when you have to start a new field, particularly retirement is a good opportunity. COVID forced me in college. I think it's a wonderful learning opportunity if you can have the right mindset of I get to, not I have to. And now I look forward to it's like, what else you got? Now I've had like at least 7 careers right now. I've done everything from national security to I was a concierge. I've done radio, TV, and all these other amazing things that you're not going to find someone like me. I finally embraced it instead of fought it. There wasn't the resistance that most of us was like, oh, and you have the harping. Now it's like, what else you got? I get to do this again. It's like, I'm only 55. What else do I get to do for the next 5 or 10 years, or reinvent myself doing something else? But that's harder the older you get. And I think it shouldn't be. I think we should be just getting started. Now I've got all the tools in my arsenal, and now I know how to do it faster. My first master's took me 3 years. This one only took me a year. And I was kind of playing with it because I was in the winter. It was COVID. What else do academics do, right? We go back to school.
So with that, I am going to open it up for conversation with our live audience. We have about 10-15 minutes to do that. Go ahead, our live audience. Any questions, thoughts, insights you have to share as we talk about embracing a life of never giving up and knowing that it's never too late to start over. And failure is not an option.
I love that. Failure is not an option. But Cheryl, what was it? Something had to have triggered you when you were sitting in that chair, immobilized in a sense by what happened to you. What triggered you to take that first step out of the chair and take back your life, or at least take the first steps to taking back your life?
That's an interesting question. I remember the night very, very clearly. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I sat there having a pity party. I'm pretty good at those. I can do it better than most. And I sat there going, I am not going to allow this the rest of my life. And I finally accepted going, all right, if I'm going to be in a wheelchair, then I'm going to see the world in a wheelchair. And I remember weeks later, I went to a conference and I was in that wheelchair. Now, I told everyone that I had had an injury because that's much easier than telling them you have a debilitating illness, because people are very standoffish. But I remember that defining moment going, well, you're going to suck it up, buttercup, and you're going to move forward, or you're going to accept this, because I was not willing to live in that bed, and I was not willing to be a prisoner in my home. And I got mad, and I'm notorious for that. I started my company because I got mad. I'm a Taurus. That's probably it. But I remember that anger, but it was channeled differently, because I remember the conversation, like Dr. Cass is saying, I could harp about it, I could whine about it, or I could do something about it. And I finally had the courage going, all right, how much lower can I go? The universe brought me to my knees, and it was very humbling. And that was the moment that I decided, okay, it's time to do something about it. And it was in Albuquerque, and I remember tears, anger. And then a friend of mine said, Cheryl, stop thinking about it and get into your heart. And that's when somebody asked you, Cheryl, what do you do? What do you want? And then she leaned forward, she goes, what do you really want? And that question got my attention more than anything else. And I was like, I am going to walk again, and I am not going to be defined by that chair. And eventually it took a lot of hard work, but it was my attitude that had to shift. The world around me didn't. I had to shift on the inside. That was the longest process. So I appreciate the question, but it was not my finest moment. I did not do it gracefully. I didn't do it elegantly. I threw incredibly gifted temper tantrums. Incredibly. I mean, I should have been given an Academy Award. I was anything but I now, when I say my prayers and my gratitude, it's like, let me go through whatever challenges I go through with grace, with elegance, because they're all for me. And I have to remember that lesson. But I don't whine very much anymore. I get 5 minutes. That's it. I'm done. But that was a very painful moment, Lois. So I appreciate the question. It was not a proud moment, but I guess it turned out to be, because I finally dug deeper than I've ever had to do to be able to decide I will not allow this to be my legacy. That was really what it came down to.
What a brilliant question, Lois. And I love how you responded to that, Cheryl. And one of the things that caught my attention is you have said this 3 times now in this conversation. You had to get out of your head and get into your heart. And that is a mistake most of us do, right? As a whole person, we have our thinking, we have our feeling, and we have our doing. And we truly get to embrace our whole self and live as a whole person when we integrate all 3 together and live in every moment with all 3 integrated. Some of us get stuck in our heads, some of us get stuck in our feelings, and some of us just keep doing so that we don't have to stop to think or feel.
Oh, I've done that one too, is stay busy as you want. You don't have to think, you don't have to feel, you just keep busy. And then you have the rocking chair effect. Never really gets anywhere, but it keeps you busy so you don't have to deal with it. That was the lesson. I had to deal with it. And boy, that was the most intense pain I have felt in my entire life. And it wasn't physical that you could say like you broke an arm or you had surgery or something. It was a pain in your soul. And I know that's kind of, artsy fartsy and woo woo kind of thing, but I will remember to the depth of my core that it was like the worst pain I've ever experienced. But it was you have a choice. You can shut it off or you can do something about it. And as I moved through it, now I got to the other side. And it's so much easier now that I'm there. But it took me years to get through it. And I don't think many people, they want to get on the other side of it, but they're not willing to do that work, Cass, at all. And trust me, I wasn't willing to say.
So if you were to give people 3 pointers on how to get past wherever they're stuck, because when people think they have failed, it truly means they're stuck somewhere. They're stuck in their thinking, their feeling, or their doing. What 3 tips can you give for people to get past where they're stuck so that they can get unstuck and keep moving forward? Because life is about living.
It is. And I think part of this comes down to what I teach in my classes is when you ask the right questions, the right answers will come. I don't think we ask the right questions. So that's the first thing, is you have to really be honest with you. Nobody's in the room. Get a journal and really have that honest conversation and take accountability for it. The second one is legacy. What do you want your legacy to be? And for someone like me, I couldn't have children. That was a medical option that was never something. So I didn't have the genetic legacy that I could leave behind. And I was so tired of people asking medically, well, how are you today, Cheryl? And that's all they knew is Cheryl's latest whatever I was going through. And I'm like, I didn't want that. I wanted to be remembered that when I left this earth, there was going to be something that I did that made this world a better place. And now I've got accolades beyond words that I know I've done something. I can now put my flag and say Cheryl was here. The third part, this one's going to be a little touchy-feely, but it really is. A friend of mine is one of my mentors. His name is Steve Farber. And his is the idea of loving what you do in service of people who love. And I think it comes down to loving yourself and forgiving yourself for all of the things you didn't do and all of the things you didn't, because we never regret what we did do. We always regret what we didn't. I was tired of having any regrets. I fixed what I could. Now I will go forward and know that it happened for me, not to me. But I really want no more regrets. And I will go forth and see the world in whatever condition I can until the fat lady sings. And I will have no more regrets. And I really do believe the best is yet to come. And I'm trying to work like that, but it's a mindset. You've got to get your mind right. I don't care whether it's your health, whether it's your mind, whether it's your body, whether it's your business, whether it's whatever it may be. You get this right, the rest is easy.
Very much so. Very much so. Betsy, do you have any thoughts you want to add to this conversation?
No, I don't have any questions for Cheryl. I know Cheryl well at this point, and I think I've had similar experiences, not quite the same, and I appreciate the way she's phrased things tonight in expressing the, and kick yourself. Feel free to kick yourself, get yourself over it, and move on. Part of life to continue to build and develop and achieve. So.
And Dr. Betsy was here on one of my organ epiphanies, went to go visit an organist in Philly, and it was very wonderful to see the Wanamaker organ with her. But part of that was being open to vulnerable. And I think that's really the key. We don't like to be vulnerable. We don't like to be shown that we're weak. We don't like to show we're emotional because we think people will judge us. And the point is, if you have people who judged you during the worst parts of your life, get rid of them. I don't care if they're family or friends.
Wait, thank you, Dr. Betsy. And Dr. Cheryl, you bring up an interesting point. Not everybody think of vulnerability as a weakness.
I think it's
Some cultures celebrate the acknowledgement of vulnerability, and leadership truly requires us to be willing to be vulnerable. Without being vulnerable, we can't be leaders. We can't influence. So where is the notion of if you're vulnerable, you're weak comes from? And how does one take charge of that and not allow that narrative to define us?
I'm going to use Dr. Betsy as an example. Dr. Betsy and I have been faculty for years, but never knew each other well enough. And so we had the veneer of having to play the part of being the academic faculty. We couldn't be human. We couldn't be joking. We had to know what to say, what not to say. And if you don't trust somebody, you really keep your mouth shut. When I got a chance to visit her and we explored a hobby of mine and she came to visit and we've become closer afterwards, we were able to see a side of each other that we don't normally see in academia. And I think that ability to be vulnerable, but also to be human and to take a risk, because I didn't know what she was going to think of me. I mean, not many people will have the goofy talent. They're going to go 24 hours to see an organ concert for all of maybe an hour. And not have people think you're weird. The academia doesn't know that side of me. They don't know that I'm a Harley girl and half the other personality things I do. Betsy was very open and accommodating. She said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And she didn't judge me. But that's the secret. She let me be me because I was too afraid to be me in the professional space. The day I found out I was human was a tough day, going, oh, that's not good news. I'm not perfect. Horrors. And the fact that we can give ourselves the ability to dust ourselves off, pick ourselves up, say, I'm sorry, take accountable and move on. But a lot of people are so afraid to offend anybody, they end up saying nothing and they are not their authentic self. And that was the biggest lesson. I'm going to be me. If you don't like me, there's the door. I have no tolerance for you if you don't want to be in my world. If you do, I'm amazing. But you got to get through some of the stuff to trust. And a lot of people don't like being vulnerable. They don't like some of the emotional quirks that I have. But if you love somebody, you love them unconditionally. And you love them even more when they go through difficult times. That's when you know who your true friends are. And that's how I knew in Albuquerque, the friends I've had for 30 and 40 years, they got me through this in spite of myself, And I think that's what we need to do is you need to love yourself and love others. It's that simple. But we don't like that 4-letter word any more than we like the F word because it's too touchy-feely. I'm like, yeah, I love my students. I love my family. I love my dog. I love Betsy. I love a whole lot of people. And that's okay because I'm human and we should love because the opposite is hate. And I think that's tragically with all the violence that are in there. But it takes a stronger person to be able to tell you that and operationalize love in the boardroom. And people don't do that. That's just too touchy-feely, particularly it's more feminine energy than masculine energy. Not that I want to throw our male friends under the bus, but the fact is that's been a masculine leadership trait to not find value in weakness, because that's what they say. If you ask a question, you're weak. If you're emotional, you're weak. All these other kinds of things. Like, no, I'm the exact opposite. You ask a question, that's right.
When men get lost, they don't ask for directions, and forever they're driving in circles, right? So that is really
amen. There you go. Exactly. But the point is why we think that we won't get promoted if somebody sees a chink in our armor. You know, I blame Disney just a little bit because I still have the princess fantasy. You know, I'm still waiting for Prince Charming, and I got tired of waiting, so I did it myself. So, you know, if the glass slipper I left behind a long time, if he can't find it, then he really is losing because he's still asking for directions. It's like both shoes are there. Go find them. I'll be here. I have a life to leave. You know, if you catch up, I'll let you know.
So
But seriously,
do you find academia more rigid? Because I too, I came from the business world into academia, the reverse of what you did, right? You went from academia into the business world. So because I came into academia from the business world, I brought my business professional self into the classroom. I am a very different professor compared to all my peers, and my students know it, and the university knows it, and they allow me to do what I do because the students love it.
exactly.
And I help my students transition into the work world, while traditional academia gives them a piece of paper and tells them, go figure it out. Right.
And see, that's it. I think it's this whole mentorship in there. Why do we have to go solo? I remember I was my mentor's first doc student. And I tell him I break everybody else in, and they all owe me a thank you note. And I'm still very tight with him to this day. But we became human. But I remember the first time I saw him, and he was in jeans and gym shoes, and we went out to have a beer at a bar. And I'm thinking, that image does not match. He's the doctor. He's supposed to be in a suit, and he's supposed to be the scholar. And we had a very, you know, business relationship because it was it. As soon as he became human to me, he's just, you know, another, and that relationship changed. And I see that with my graduates. I've got almost 100 now. And it's strange when they have that Dr. C, and then suddenly the day it becomes Cheryl. And they can see me as one of their biggest cheerleaders, not as someone above them with a distance, but someone that just walks beside them and holds their hand. And I don't think we teach that in academia, because I don't think many people know how to do it. They just think it's safer to keep them at a distance. Don't get too emotional. Don't get involved. I don't want to know your business. My job is this clear boundaries. I'm like, oh no, my students
So the
are messy.
academia world in the United States is very much an I-thou relationship. So there is huge power distance.
Yes.
Asia, to a great extent, and Europe to a larger extent, is very much an apprenticeship approach to education. So you practice and you figure it out, and education is not a test with a pass or a fail.
I love
So
it.
the world, you experience the world differently for 21 years, and you're not just sent into the world where that reality looks completely opposite to what your life was for 21 years.
Well, when
So
the student is ready, the teacher appears, but we think a teacher has to look a certain way. I remember one of my students caught me at a Harley gig once, and I didn't think they'd ever know that. And they figured out, and they're like, but you don't look like my teacher, and you're not supposed to have a life. And I'm like, why? There are many facets to my personality, and they could only see me as that rigid faculty. And I'm like, oh, you have no idea the kinds. And some of my students who have gotten to know me are like, wow, all the steps you can do. It's like, there you go. But academia doesn't know me like that. And I've had a hard time, because I know, and you hear the horror stories. If you're your authentic self and you are willing to really put it out there, you could get fired. Sure. And a lot of people are not willing to risk that. And I think we're risking more than just getting fired. We're risking our humanity. My students can do amazing things because
young people are choosing not to go to universities anymore because the university is not a real place.
Exactly.
So the young people are going to self-select out because we have created an artificial world of academia. One of the things I get to do is work with accrediting agencies to work with universities on how to make academia real.
I can't believe all the years I've gotten in trouble for being that real and for doing things in there and getting my hand slapped. Betsy and I talk about this all the time. It's like, really? You know what? My students need to be loved more than anything else. Then I can teach them. They have to feel safe. They have to trust me. They have to have that relationship with me. I can move mountains with them. But the university wants to keep the boundaries, and they wants to keep this in a box. And I'm like, oh, honey, I am the worst person to stay in a box. I don't color within the lines. It's just not, I don't even have the right crayons. And the fact that I've been in academia for 22 years is like, without getting fired, is amazing, because I push those boundaries because I want humanity first. My kids are going to do amazing things, and they are my kids, but it's humanity first, people first, then I'll teach them. And then I can do amazing things with them. But if you just go, nope, sorry, I don't talk to you on the phone. This is my little box, and you do your homework. That's not how I roll. And the day that that's going to become permanent, it's going to be the day I have to walk away from academia going, no, I need to have human. think about what happened in COVID. We hated being isolated. Now they want to isolate us even more. Humanity is about connection, not isolation. We've got to learn to be human and to know that, yeah, sometimes humans messy. Sometimes we're not perfect. Sometimes we actually even fall off the rails. We get up and we do it again. It's when we stick with that, I think, Cass, is the real problem. We need to have humanity back in the classroom. We need to use the L word. We need to be human. And it does take a community. And I think we need to get back to that. That's where that mentorship program comes in. That's where that connectiveness is like, I don't have all the answers. Betsy will be the first one to tell you, I know very few of it, even with all my credentials. The question is, I'm willing to take the risk and feel the fear and do it anyway. And a lot of folks are not willing to take that risk because it could backfire. And I mean, yeah, I've had some backfires, but I'm still here and I'm still willing to go the distance. And that's where it is I will fight for my students from a human standpoint. Then I will fight for them from a credential standpoint. That's the difference.
And on that note, I just want to point out that one of the things we do wrong in academia is teach that there are answers, but in the real world, there are choices and consequences to those choices.
Nice. I
And
like
if
that.
you can teach it in a way that life is about choices, and most of the time choices are between tea and coffee. Don't tell me you want wine. It's not an option, right? So choose based on the choices available and navigate. And like Goldilocks, find that centeredness and move towards getting it just right, because you're not going to get it in one step. Just like you were not born the minute your mother wanted to have a baby. She had to carry you to term for 9 months, right? And then a whole bunch of people had to help you while she pushed and pushed. So we have to figure this out. And how do we give people the opportunity to learn that there are no answers? There are choices. Life is a chess game.
I think so, but there's an easy answer. I think we need to make them children again. When you learn how to walk, this is why your analogy in there, when a kid learns how to walk, they're doing it for selfish purposes. They want to get across the room because grandma's got a cookie in their hand and they want the cookie, and walking is the best and most efficient way to get them there. And they don't think of that. And when they don't make it, they giggle, they fall down, they laugh, they get up and they do it again. They make it a game. They don't make it painful. Somewhere along the line, when we learned, learning became painful. It embarrassed us, it humiliated us, it distanced us, it did all these horrible things that we now going, I don't want to learn anything new. I remember how to bicycle. I fell off and skidded my knee. I learned with the dating thing and it was awful. And you know what? I don't want to have to go through a broken heart. We don't like the consequences, but we don't understand that if we can embrace them and have a little fun with it and be that giggling little kid and just say, it's just a game, get over yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. Just go ahead and try it again and do the Edison. So 800 didn't work, 900 didn't work. We'll keep going until it does. We stop at 1 in my case, sometimes 3, but we don't go the distance because it's the attitude that says, it's too painful, it's not worth it. If it's worth it, all you do is with a smile on your face. So I think it's more mindset. And let's go be that giggling 2-year-old. No one said we didn't have to, like your slide said, right? Dance through life. Oh, baby, that's all I do is dance. And now it's like, you can't stop me. I'm going to have a little fun. And the university frowns on fun. I'm like, you know what? We're going to have fun doing this thing. Because if not, what's the point?
Yeah, life cannot be a drudgery. And on that note, we bring this conversation to a close, but I want to take a moment and give you 60 seconds to let our audience know how they can find you and how they can stay in touch with you.
Oh, bless your heart. You can find me at drcherylentz.com. My email is drcherylentz@gmail.com. And if you just put in Dr. Cheryl Lentz on the internet, you're going to find all kinds of different sites and things that I do in there. And I welcome you to my world, whether you work with me professionally or not. Give me a call. I like talking with folks from all walks of life. Happy to help.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Cheryl, it's been such a pleasure and an honor. And I cannot wait for our book to come out 5th of October. I invite all our audience to make sure you read every chapter. Dr. Cheryl talks about failure and how to fail fast and how to learn to succeed and how failure is not the end. It's part of your journey. So I encourage all of you to mark your calendar, 5th of October. The book is going to be on a special promotional offer. So go out there and watch for all our announcements. And most of all, no matter what happens in life, it's not the end. All the challenges that happen to you is polishing you. If every rub bothers you, how are you going to get polished to your brilliance?
Well
Keep
done.
that in mind. Every time things don't go your way, remember You're being made into an emerald or a diamond or a sapphire. Whatever your brilliant birthstone is, that's what you're being polished into. And surround yourself with humanity that is going to help you get there, because every human interaction is our opportunity for transformation. Go out there, and as you transform lives, make sure you take a moment to transform yourself.
Amen.